Okay, I think that is the real end of the agenda speakers, non-agenda speakers. So it takes us to board discussion items. The first item I have on there is with respect to the advisory committee policy. As you all know, we approved the new emergency policy. Then the Attorney General opinion came in, making it the new policy a violation of sunshine, although I don't agree with the opinion and the analysis of the statutory provisions that were cited. I'm not the Attorney General, so I can't do anything about that. But what I can do is suggest to you that I've worked with the General Counsel, and there is a possibility of a modification to our policy to allow Cork to meet. As all of you know, I attend the Cork meetings. As I told the Cork members, it's extremely important, I believe, that the Cork members give their input to the board because we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars. And I just attended the last meeting that lasted like 2 minutes because none of the committee members can speak, although they were all on the Zoom meeting, the Google Meets meeting. None of them are allowed to speak because there wasn't quorum. So when talking to the General Counsel, we looked at the ISOC policy, and that allows for alternates. The alternates are allowed to speak and take part in the meeting. They're just not allowed to vote. So if we change the outcome for 90 days, I talked to David Porter, the chairman of Cork. He feels that within 90 days he'll be able to get quorum again because a couple of the older folks are waiting for their vaccinations, and as soon as they get those, they're willing to come back in. So what I suggest is we change the makeup of Cork for 90 days to allow for 7 alternates and 7 regular board members. The alternates would be allowed to participate and speak. They just wouldn't be able to vote, so they could get their point across to the other voting members. And then for quorum purposes, only the 7 would count. So they would only need 4 board members to be present or committee members to be present in order to have a valid Cork Sunshine okayed meeting. Although all of them could participate, it would only take 4 of them to be in the room at one time in order to have a meeting. So what I'm suggesting is we do something with that policy so that we can, and they've now missed 4 months of being able to advise the board on agenda items that we've been approving, other than being able to individually send us their thoughts on them. But so I request a motion and a second that the following be placed on the agenda for the next public board meeting for the board to vote on: an emergency modification of policy 1.093 on Cork to reduce the number of primary members and allow for alternate members to be effective for 90 days. And 2, if the emergency policy is adopted, that there be a second item on that agenda for the board to vote on which member of their recommended appointees to Cork be designated as a primary member and which person will be designated as an alternative member for 90 days. Mrs. Whitfield?
Thank you. Has Cork indicated that they have people who would be interested in being alternate members?
Well, this is a good question because I asked district administration was to contact every Cork member. I checked, and it was not a sunshine violation because it's not anything they're going to vote on, and find out which of them would be willing to be alternates and which ones would come to the meetings. I don't know what the result of that is. I was told that tonight each of us was going to get something about our individual members. I asked the General Counsel why we couldn't just get a list so we could all see which of the 14 members is willing to come and not. So if any of you received something, I didn't check my email recently, but I don't know which one of the Cork members is willing to come and which ones aren't, or which ones are willing to be alternates and which ones aren't. Ms. Brill?
So I understand the conundrum, and it's horrible because it puts us in it's a bad position because we rely on the Cork members so much. But I have the same question: is who's going to be alternates? Is it in that body that you already have? By the time we sort that out, the people who are older who are getting the COVID shots may be back. So because that whole process takes 4, 5, 6 weeks before they're fully covered. If at the longest, it's either 4 or 6 weeks. So if they're getting the vaccines, we may be fine in a month. So I just feel that we need more information.
General Counsel, do you know where this information is at that I asked to be presented to the board tonight?
Well, I know that there's a staff person who has the information, and that information can be made available to you all. It's my understanding that your appointees have indicated, what their preferences are, and so that information can be provided to you. You can certainly ask your appointee. You can contact individual Cork members to get their, to get their input on that. And then if it does go forward as an emergency policy, you could vote at that same time on, which one of your appointees would serve as an alternate and or a primary.
Mrs. Paul.
So I believe Ms. Hahn, Holly Hahn in the General Counsel's office has that information. In regards to a summary, I think the majority of the members were okay with that, but in terms of having that system where you have alternates, but I think it's a question as to, who will be the alternate. So if each board member has 2 members, then, that has to be sorted out.
Well, we don't necessarily have to have each board member pick which one of their 2 is an alternate. There may be 7 alternates that, that want to be alternates that we should just look at it as a whole, is why I asked that we had some summary that said which of the current 13 members are willing to do what, so the board could look at that list and say, yes, there are 7. Whether they're mine or Dr. Robinson's or somebody else's, it doesn't matter. There are 7 that said they would be alternates. So, I wish we would have gotten that information. I asked it to be presented tonight. I know that the Cork members were all asked and they gave their opinions, but anyway, if the board was willing to still move forward with this, we can still get it done, and then we'll know by the next meeting which one of them are willing to serve as alternates and which ones aren't. Ms. McQuinn and then Vice Chairwoman Brill.
I think I saw Ms. Brill's hand first, so I'll go. Thank you.
All I was going to do was make the motion that you asked us to make, but I can't remember everything you said. So I move what Chairman Barbieri stated.
Can I ask real quick? I just want to know, what can Wanda's team, what can we provide to the board to help make the decision? I just need to know what you need.
Well, if the board is willing to make an emergency policy to do this, by the next meeting, we're going to need to know which of the Cork members is willing to come to the meeting. It's not so much which ones are willing to be alternates. We need to know if we have at least, 4 or 5 that are willing to come to the meetings. Now, according to David Porter, he thinks he can get 6. So if we can get this policy in place, starting in March, we could have a Cork meeting instead of another month, which would make 5 months of no Cork meetings. So if we can just have that information by the time this goes on the agenda, which would be March 3rd, we'd be able to move forward. Dr. Robinson? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. McQuinn, you were next.
That's okay. Shouldn't have given up my spot. Do we need a second for us to?
Dr. Robinson seconded the motion.
I'm making no motion because I want to be able to make a decision. Okay. I'm uncomfortable voting for an emergency policy that Cork is one of our most complicated committees for me to understand. And I so appreciate Mr. Porter's work and keeping us all informed. And I do understand that they need to come before us. There's very important work to be done. We have referendum projects. We have so much to be done. But I'm not comfortable saying that I would support that when it comes forward. I would want time to really look at it.
Dr. Robinson?
So I appreciate the creativity, actually. But let me just say that, and I realize that approach will not work for the other advisory committees because we don't have, primary, or we don't have 2 representatives for each one. But let me just say, I think that the other advisory committees are so valuable that they deserve the same kind of creative thought. I know the answer won't be the same, but. And yeah, Cork, with their architects and engineers and all that, all that is kind of like foreign to me, and I really do depend on that. But for example, District Diversity and Equity Committee and Academic Advisory Committee were created after a time of crisis in this district. And I want to hear their voice too, right? So if we can come up with whatever kind of free thinking, creativity to see if we can figure out how to do whatever, emergency, whatever, so that they can meet and so that, there's enough of a quorum so that other people can participate virtually so that then I can watch their meetings and learn from them and see the world through these multiple viewpoints, because that's why we created those 2. And then we have budget advisory. I mean, our advisory committees are all valuable. It's not just Cork. but I'm good with this.
Dr. Abrams, I understand, and my understanding is, General Counsel's office, I asked you to make sure you looked at every single advisory committee to the board to see what we could do to make sure that they all had quorum. I understand audit just missed their last meeting because they didn't have quorum, so we need to take a look at all of those. My understanding was your office was looking at all those policies. I just know that I'm pushing on Cork because I go to that meeting every month and they haven't had a meeting for 4 months. So I agree with you. All of us have an interest in the budget committee, the calendar committees of superintendents. But we have the TAC and we have all the other advisory committees that advise us. And my understanding is we were looking at that, and one policy doesn't fit all of them. Each one of them has some different aspects that need to be considered. I don't know who was next. Mrs. Andrews?
And we heard from Ron LaFace today, and he sounded like this might move, so it looks like we may just be sitting on not getting any information for the next few months. He seemed to think that it was received, because this is a problem that's happening all across the state. It's not just here in Palm Beach County. So have we checked around to see what other districts are doing?
Yes, I've been in communication with Broward because they specifically requested an attorney general opinion because they're experiencing, the same outcry, if you will, from their constituents and their committees as well. So, I mean, we're all in the same boat here. Now, to Dr. Robinson's question, the fix, if you will, is this alternative members or alternate members and primary. Now, the difficulty in that is sometimes it's not that easy to come up with one, let alone two. So, that's the difficulty in it, but the out-of-the-box or creative thinking is to come up with a primary and an alternate so that it can reduce the number of voting members, which will then reduce your quorum. So that is something that our office could work on, recommending to the superintendent an emergency policy, but that still leaves open the question of, can you get enough volunteers to fill those two roles? And then the other sticky wicky, if you will, is the fact that some of these advisory committees are appointed by outside organizations, and that just complicates it because it's the power to appoint. It's not in the hands of the board members, so that creates a complication that. We can continue to look into that, but that would require a little more discussion in those instances.
Vice Chair.
Thank you. So this kind of ties into when we were talking about our legislative priorities and home rule and the ability to do certain things when there's an emergency. And I think it's incumbent upon the people that are going to be lobbying up in Tallahassee or speaking to Tallahassee on our behalf, and we should as well, to make sure that our legislators know that the inability that we have in a crisis like this to be able to meet virtually or to make those decisions ourselves, it's impeding our operations. And so I think that needs to be shared. And we need to talk about it, because this is a perfect example of what happens when there's an emergency and we're not able to meet the needs of our district.
Any other comments? All those in favor of the motion?
Yeah, okay.
Opposed? Ms. McQuinn's opposed. The motion carries 6-1. All right. So it'll be on the, it'll be on the agenda for the March 3rd meeting. Those two items will be on the agenda for the March 3rd meeting. Superintendent's indicated that before that meeting, we'll have the response from all 13 current members. I think there's one vacancy. I'm not sure which one of you need to appoint somebody, but the 13 members as to which of them would be willing to be alternates and which of them are willing to come to the meeting so that we can finally get Cork to meet. Mrs. Andrews?
Yes, and I heard you, Dr. Robinson, with those committees. We're in this pandemic with our children falling behind, and those committees are real critical. Now, I know you said Broward, but we have the Florida School Boards Association. We did hear from Ron LaFace, but I would like to know what's happening. This is a state issue, And I would like to see some research to be done. I mean, we have some real creative counties, and maybe some people have come up with some solutions here. And if somebody from, through the chair to the superintendent, if somebody can do some legwork to see what's going on around us so that we can at least, by the time we get back together again, maybe have some ideas of what people are doing. The Superintendent's Association, lots of different groups out there experiencing the same thing that we're experiencing. So if somebody could check on that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, board members. My computer went down, so the next item on the agenda is a discussion item. Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. So this is a topic that really irritates me. And so I'm going to try to see if I can do this in an organized fashion. So first off, you know, World Health Organization declared in January 30th, 2020, public health emergency of international concern. It formally became the pandemic, right? We're the largest employer in Palm Beach County. Now, there is a treatment available under emergency use authorization for the treatment of COVID if you have mild to moderate symptoms. It's monoclonal antibody. These are lab-made proteins that attach to the spike protein that I think everybody's heard about of this SARS-CoV-2 virus. These monoclonal antibody treatments received their EUA in November and December, I believe. So I want to give some information, and then I'm gonna get to my point. So the criteria is if you're COVID positive, you're within 10 days of symptom onset, and you have any underlying conditions that increase your risk of severe disease, meaning obesity, chronic kidney disease, diabetes, immunosuppressive disease. I think we kind of have heard these before, right? Age greater than 65 or age greater than 55, and cardiovascular disease, hypertension, or chronic respiratory disease. So we're the largest employer. I suspect we have a significant number of employees that would fall into this high-risk category. So as part of my commitment to a community-based organization, after receiving information about the availability of monoclonal antibody or lack thereof, I started doing some digging, and I spent a significant amount of time last week calling the Tallahassee, the Surgeon General's office, and talking to, seemed like 25 people there in multiple hospitals, right? Now, I'm going to tell you what a pharmacist in a hospital told me, and I'm going to quote this pharmacist, that they made a corporate decision not to provide this monoclonal antibody at their particular hospital. And it just really angers me because I'm going to tell you who has it, right? And then you figure it out, okay? So Wellington, Jupiter, Bethesda, Boca Regional. See the pattern? You understand what I'm saying? So my neighbors, if anybody tested positive, the hospital anywhere near us would say, no, we don't have it. Go home, check your oxygen level. You know, when it drops, when you become short of breath, come in. We'll put you in the ICU and on the ventilator, okay? Now, okay. It ticks me off. The studies show that the monoclonal antibody is quite effective. Of course, nothing is 100%. The former president got it, okay? But I'm concerned that our employees can't get it unless they know and have a ride to one of the previously mentioned hospitals. And so I bring this up not just for educational purposes, but to ask our risk management, and especially as we're now going into these negotiations for insurance coverage again, right? What I want to make sure of, to every extent that I can, is that we are not financially incentivizing hospitals who make a corporate decision to not prevent illness, okay? That bugs the living daylights out of me. So they say, I'm telling you, I had, it seemed like a million conversations. One was, well, you know, our outpatient infusion is for the patients getting chemotherapy. We can't mix them with COVID patients. Well, damn, excuse me, how big is your hospital? You don't have any other space? Like, I do not understand this, okay? Another one said, well, we can't tie up our emergency room beds. What? So you want to wait? It's your corporate decision to wait until their oxygen level drops, and then you can tie up an emergency room bed? Like, I cannot accept this, right? Now that I've seen it, now that I've seen the pattern, and I understand the significance of this, this would be like saying, I'm not going to treat your hypertension till you have a stroke. What? And so my request is that the board, I hope you agree with me, that we ask our risk management folks to try to determine, to whatever degree they can, are we incentivizing hospitals that deny this life-saving medication, right? And also, if we can use whatever leverage we can find as the largest employer in Palm Beach County to help these hospitals understand that it's in the public interest, right, to make this available. It's free, okay? The feds buy it from the manufacturers. They send it to the State Department of Health. The Florida Department of Health has an intermediary. The hospitals order it from the intermediary. If you go on the DOH website, they'll tell you that, and no, not on the website. This was quoted to me by one of these 25 million people I talked to, that the Florida Department of Health equitably provides the monoclonal antibody to the healthcare facilities that completed the survey. And every 2 weeks, they send a link out to the healthcare facilities so that they can reorder, okay? Now, I'm not gonna name them, but you know who they are, who's not ordering it. And my neighbors, the very ones who's keeping their children home because they're scared that they're gonna bring the virus back home and that somebody's gonna die from it. Well, guess what? And then they can't get the monoclonal unless they had transportation and they know to go to one of the hospitals I named. I'm sorry. This is one of the most egregious examples of inequity that I'm aware of. And I would just like for us to do everything that we can do to try to eliminate this inequity. Thank you.
Board comments? Mrs. Andrews, are you reaching? Dr. Ramos, is this something that our clinic, the new clinic, could help with that's here on our property?
There's a process by which they would need to get authorized. I'd be happy to give that information to whoever was going to track this down, right?
Dr. Robinson, if you can get that information to Mr. Burke, he'll get it to the team, and we'll explore
Okay,
it.
so but listen, that's a good look, but that is not enough.
Vice Chair?
Thank you, and certainly it's alarming, but there's more hospitals involved than the ones you're thinking about just in your neighborhood. I mean, I was sitting here thinking about all the other ones in my district that don't have it too. So if there's an opportunity, I mean, this is unfortunately beyond my scope of intelligence and understanding. You know, I would leave it to staff to see what could be done.
Mrs. Andrews?
And we have United Healthcare. They know. The medical groups know. I mean, we're dealing with Alina Alonso from the health department. The things that you're talking about tonight, I would think the healthcare district, all of those people have this kind of information that you're talking about, Dr. Robinson. So when I think about this, and you know, and people are getting sick left and right, and we don't know what's going to happen to anybody, I really want to know how this works. And when I hear this, you're talking about equity, I can call it a whole lot of other names, because lots of people are being left behind, and guess what? They're going to die if we don't do what we needed to do. We saw the president when he was taken in. He was really sick, the former president, and he got that and was able to walk right back out. All of the people that were kind of sick with him and his entourage got it, okay? And all of these people who have connections are getting it. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about a bus driver, a custodian, a teacher. You know, all of these people who work every day, they're frontline people making it happen. We're talking about getting the schools open. We want all the schools to open as fast as we can. But if we don't have the knowledge and the skills necessary to know that when our people need help, that they're going to be able to know where to go and what to do. And when I hear this scenario that Dr. Robinson is talking about, it's pretty frightening. So I think Mr. Burke and Diane Howard and the people over in RISC, you all can dig into this and get us a lot more information about what this is all about and how is it impacting us as the largest employer of people who make a whole lot of money within our district for those who make very little. And those that make a lot of money can get what they need depending on where they live and the circumstances. But those people that can't get it, it's like we just got the vaccine out in Pahokee because the people weren't getting it, and all over Palm Beach County and Tabernacle Baptist Church where people couldn't get it. And in Delray, it's the same kind of thing we're talking about again. If you get sick, how are you going to be able to get the help that you need? And since we pay the big insurance companies and they want to do business with the school district of Palm Beach County, I would like to get some answers to this so that we can help our people.
Vice Chairwoman Brill and then Ms. Ayala.
Thank you. So I have two suggestions, Dr. Robinson, in addition to what you're talking about. First off is educating the county commission, someone reaching out to the county commission, because this is a county-wide issue. It's not, it affects our employees and we're the school board, but I think that they need to also advocate. And then I know that you replaced me on the School Health Advisory Committee. I think we need as many hands and people to know about this, because I certainly didn't. So I think it's a matter of, I'm sure you were planning to share that with them, but I do think that it's something that the county commission should be aware of, because at least one of those hospitals that you mentioned is connected to other hospitals that you didn't mention that clearly don't have it. So it's a concern.
Ms. Ayala.
Thank you. And Dr. Robinson, I appreciate you bringing this to our attention with your background and expertise and how this can be implemented. I wasn't even aware this was being done in our county, so it was kind of news to me, and I appreciate that knowledge. I think that we agree that we want to do anything in our power to make sure that our employees, our school staff, our teachers, and our students are as safe as they can be and as healthy as they can be going into the summer and another school year. And I think everyone on our team will do anything to make that happen. But may I recommend that we all use up here as leaders in the community our connections with other business community leaders to reach out to that JFK, to that Good Sam, to that St. Mary's. We all know people in their government relations team, people who run the hospitals. What are they doing? What can they do when we say that this is a priority for us? And then our team can then back that up with the need for that. But I think this is something that we can be a leader on. But we certainly, as we all understand, do not have the capacity as a school district to make this happen at hospitals. So we have to start working our community kind of together to make this happen for us. But I appreciate it being brought up and how anything we can do to make that happen. I think we all have the capacity to start reaching out to our partners in the healthcare field in this county and start asking that they make this a priority too.
Mrs. Andrews.
But I think, and I like all of that, but I think we now know what's happening around here in Palm Beach County. We don't have all the information, but you really let it out tonight, Dr. Robinson, that some people are getting the service and others are not. And so we're a big employer, $3 billion industry, $3+ billion industry here. And we can find out. And yes, the county, Ms. BRILL, because guess what? That's where we go through the county, the healthcare district and everybody, the county commissioners, all of us. And we know the different hospitals. I don't know if they have it out at Lakeside and Belglade, you know, I don't know. And so as a result, when we start looking at this thing, I want to see more. I want to see the discrepancy and what are we going to do to fix it is what I'm talking about. And, you know, that's why I said risk management, the health agencies as well as the county health department. Dr. Alonzo knows. I mean, you know, we have nurses in every school, all of these people that do this work. And you're a doctor, Dr. Robinson. That's why you did your digging and you found out. So other people know. And before somebody dies or whatever happens here in Palm Beach County because they can't get it, we need to see what we can do to be proactive. And I agree, Ms. Ayala, that we know a lot of people and we can begin having those conversations. But I would like to see some kind of way that we can not just have our own individual conversations. I want to find a way that I can see what's going on because somebody has the data, and that's what we need to see. That's what I'd like to see.
Go ahead, Doc.
Thank you. Well, thank you for recognizing this as an issue. I could tell you, you could go on the HHS website, and there's also an infusion clinic website that lists who has it. It's not, Lakeside has never been listed. Like, surprise, surprise, right? I don't know, I appreciate your comments and your thoughts and your suggestions. I agree with Mrs. Andrews. I want to see the change, right? You know, and I think that we have a lot of leverage as the largest employer. And just in closing, I will just add that the T. Leroy Jefferson Medical Society, which is the local branch of the National Medical Society, which is the medical society created by black physicians, you know, a century or so ago when we could not join the white medical society. T. Leroy Jefferson Medical Society will be having a press conference tomorrow at 1 o'clock about this issue as well as other inequities related to the whole COVID testing, vaccine distribution, as well as this treatment. Now, they're not letting me speak because I think they don't trust me to stay inside the lines. Imagine that. But I appreciate you hearing me. Thank you.
Mrs. Whitfield.
Let me just jump in really quickly on one item. I actually had heard that this was going on as well. And I've heard through this process that you have to be a real advocate for yourself in order to get it too. So if you get to the hospital, they may not just give it to you even if you qualify. And just this whole conversation is bringing back bad memories of me being in a hospital with my baby last year this time. So, you know, I know how hard it can be when you're sick to advocate for yourself. And you know, it's really, this whole conversation is bothering me thinking about the people in our employment that don't have a voice. And so I'm hoping that in addition to this conversation, we're also going to say something about giving it out to everyone, no matter if they speak the right language or, you know, have the right friends in that process. So if we could add that to the list, thanks.
Go ahead, Doc.
Thank you. And that's a good point. First, they need to have it. But can we just also, the other issue is, and so T. Leroy Jefferson and Unify and others are coming together. We're probably going to do a community campaign around if you test positive, and you have any of these risk factors, you could be a candidate, go demand it, to your point. But, and even there are doctors who are still telling people, just go home and check your oxygen level, right? So there's some education that has to take place in the medical community too. But my point in raising my hand again is to say, can we please ask United Healthcare to include that as part of their messaging? It seems to me that, and I didn't see it when I was playing on their website, I didn't see it. They mentioned monoclonal antibodies, but I didn't see where they said, like, go get it, right? And so how about this? How much money is it gonna save, all right? If for people who only care about money, okay? Which as best I can figure out is the corporate decision. Because the best I can figure out is they're not gonna make money by giving people monoclonal antibody. So they're not gonna give it. That's the best. I want that. I want to be wrong. I want to be proven wrong. But anyway, but the bottom line is United Health and we should want to have any of our employees that test positive be evaluated, and if they meet the criteria, receive the monoclonal antibody should they choose to have it, because then not only does that prevent, hospitalization, and also understand that we do not know all the long-term consequences of this. We have employees who were hospitalized for months, came back to work, made it a day and a half, and went back home, okay? And so I'm just saying, so not only that, the human cost, but let's just talk about the financial cost, and then the cost of an intensive care unit stay. So, like, they should want to spread that word. And so I'm going to ask that our, Dr. Fenoy, if you would have the appropriate folks contact them and say they need to spread the word while we are on the other side trying to get people to request it and have it available for whosoever shows up and meets the criteria.
All right, the next board discussion item is BD3. Ms. Brill.
Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, I was with the Council of Great City Schools for 2 very intense days, Friday and Saturday through the night. And most of our conversation revolved around the strategic planning and goals and guardrails, as they called it. And some of the districts were sharing, and we saw some of their plans. But I want to backtrack for a minute just to say that our calendars are vague on purpose. We had for the March 3rd meeting, the calendar says board special workshop meetings. And it wasn't until our board clerk passed out this email packet from Kathleen that I realized that we're going to be talking about strategic plan on the 3rd. And it entered my mind, why are we doing the strategic plan before we do the equity workshops? If we really want to make a strategic plan that's going to influence student outcomes in this district, we shouldn't be putting the cart before the horse. So I'm changing this a little, and I hope I don't get in trouble for it, but it didn't dawn on me that we're doing the equity piece like after we start the strategic planning. But the purpose of my discussion item was the thing that stood out to me was how fantastic those districts were that were using the Council of Great City Schools to facilitate their strategic plan. So I contacted Mr. Tierney, and I said to Mr. Tierney, I know we have Mary Furtakis working with us on the equity plan. I said, who's doing the strategic plan? And he said, we are. And I said, ooh, I'm not really sure that we're going to, and it's no offense to staff at all, it's not meant that way, but if we really want to make a difference, if we really want to talk about student outcomes, my ask is, number one, that we look to the Council of Great City Schools, if everybody's in agreement, to facilitate that process. And if we have to change that meeting on March 3rd, pop in other workshops. And then 2 is, should we be doing this before the equity piece is finished? Because I don't think we should.
Dr. Robinson?
I agree with you wholeheartedly. In my mind, I've said this before, but I don't know if it came out of my mouth, but I agree with you wholeheartedly. We need to figure out where we're trying to go. And then part of, I'd say to people all the time, equity is a noun and a verb. And if you recall when we had the workshop before, I asked for us to define, what did I call it? The portrait of a graduate? The portrait of the graduate is equity, the noun, where we're trying to get to, right? And so I think we need to have all those conversations before we start talking about how we get there. We don't even know where we're going. And then if we keep saying that we want equity embedded in everything, we need to have real conversation and ongoing conversations about equity. So I agree, 100%.
Mrs. Whitfield?
I'm just curious if we do, I mean, really asking staff this question, if we do change this, does this change next week and upcoming weeks? Are we going to have to kind of pivot on this?
Yeah, so you have to remember, our challenge right now is just getting you all scheduled to get this stuff done. So, remember, we don't have a meeting every week with you guys. So at this point, we have 2 consultants that one you pay for, one you don't even know we don't pay for. So we have a group called Insights that's been working with us, and it's a big grant. And so they are working with us on the development of the strategic plan. But again, the reason why next meeting is important, because it's still a structural meeting. It's not a substance meeting. So we have to get these structures in order around the strategic planning process. That is very important for us. And I can't agree with you on that. We have to get these structures in place with the groups that we have. So I am open to hiring a 3rd consultant when the implementation period is necessary. But right now, we are on a very tight timeline with everything we're asking you to do. And so for me, we would have to go back and then now readjust everything. And that is something that I am very apprehensive about at this point.
Vice Chair?
Thank you. So my belief is that if we really want a meaningful strategic plan, it's not a race, number one. We have to do it right. Looking at what is on the agenda for the next time, yes, we could talk about the groups that are involved, but this is too important. This is about student outcomes, and I really feel that I want this strategic plan to be something meaningful, something measurable. We also discussed how you could do individual, like board evaluations based upon your strategic plan, if you do this strategic plan right, which is something that this board has also discussed. I know Dr. Robinson has discussed that in the past. We have a lot of workshops out there. We're talking about 2 weeks from now. So if we want to talk about some of the structure and the stakeholder groups, that's fine. But I feel very strongly about this. I think that we really, truly, if we want to get to a different place, if this is what we really believe, then we need to do it right.
Mrs. Andrews?
I think we're lucky that we have Ms. BRILL in this cohort with the Council of Great City Schools. And we pay a lot of money to be members of the Council of Great City Schools. Those 76 big urban districts, many of them have been through their equity piece and way ahead of where we are. And that training has come from the council leadership. And that's what you're getting a bite of right now, Ms. BRILL. And so I really don't want us to stray off, because we've had a strategic plan, and that's why I wanted to make sure that we look at the things that we had not done before. We had this wonderful, beautiful glossary book of all these things that we were going to do, and so on and so on. And then when you kind of dig deep into it, much of that we had not been able to make the success of it. So we need to make sure before we start talking about this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it, that we know what we're going to be doing. And you almost need to have someone who's had success in doing it, and doing it in the big urban districts. And that's what you pay for in your membership with the council, to get that done.
Mrs. Whitfield?
Thank you. I don't want to throw a huge wrench into all the work that staff's doing, though, and we did just put off our master board training because we said we were so busy. So the idea of if we push this back, it's going to create more meetings down the line. As a compromise, could we have this meeting next week so we can at least have a little bit of the structural discussion around the strategic plan, let staff do that, and then following that meeting, see if they have an opportunity to tweak the calendar so we can put more equity stuff on the front end before we get into the rest of the strategic planning. Would that work for everyone?
Well, let me just go ahead and say what we've already scheduled and we've shared with you. So next week is a structural meeting. We're not even bringing back any drafts about the strategic plan until May. In March and April are all of our equity workshops. It's already designed that way.
Ms. Brill?
So then I return to the original question, and that is keep your meeting in place for 2 weeks from now, not next week. Do the equity piece, and then with a nod of approval from my colleagues, reach out, and I've already provided a name to Mr. Tierney from the Council of Great City Schools. They may have others, but he's the one working with these successful urban districts. See if we can use them to facilitate those future meetings for the
I agree,
strategic
but I
plan.
want the board to be clear. You have to, it is not a free service. We have to, so it's an additional cost on top of the money we already pay. Because I think one of you said that we already paid the money. No, we haven't paid for this yet. Yeah, we pay for the membership, but the cost of the service is another round of dollars. So I just want you guys to know that, that's all.
Dr. Robbins?
Thank you. So the Insight people that we don't pay for, so at our meeting in 2 weeks around the structure, I need to understand the structure that they intend to deliver and how that interacts with the equity work and what their background is in working with equity. But the other thing, the overarching message that I'm taking away is, I think I'm gonna put words in Ms. Brill's mouth. It's clearly what I think. Like, why do we need to rush, right? So I don't know, like, it's not like when our current strategic plan expires, no one knows what to do, right? And then the other thing is, I started showing data because I think we need to digest that data to figure out how we remedy the inequitable outcomes we see, right? And I think that requires discussion. Like, I know, we have an outstanding leadership team and it's in the academic areas that I focus on, Dr. Sheffield, Mr. Oswald, and Dr. Fenoy will bring forward recommendations, but we need to own it, which means we need to understand it, right? And so in my mind, like the last data I showed with these foundational reading skills, and we're moving backwards for certain subgroups from K to 3. Okay, so what's the targeted solution for that? If we don't embrace the data and understand it and deliberate about the meaning of it and how we get to these inequitable outcomes, how do we propose to solve it? And I don't see that happening in the next couple months, not if we're going to do it properly. Because we're supposed to be a collective, deliberative body, right? And so I get that we hired a superintendent, deputy CAO to be our academic experts, but guess what? We have, what do they say? I have shoes in my feet and, brain in my head, and I'm going to think about it, right? And I'm going to give my best input. And that's what we all need to do if we're going to do a strategic plan that we are going to own. And guess what? And that we are going to approve the funding for each step, because that's what ultimately is going to come to us for, right? So I think this is part of an educational process for us. What does equity mean? And then what does it look like in action? And yes, some of these districts can help share their journey on the particular thing. Maybe somebody's addressed these foundational reading skills and they can tell us the path they walked, right? But we need to do this in a deliberate fashion. And I'm not in a rush, because I want it to be just outstanding and really a blueprint for true success, and that we have that portrait of the graduate and we see our young people marching through our system to reach that predefined point, if not better.
Ms. McQuinn?
Okay. I should have written my thoughts down as I was listening. First, we talked about, Dr. Fenoy mentioned a third consultant contract. We would need to know what is that dollar amount, and is it equal to the amount we're not going to pay for master board training right now? Okay, that's one. Don't let me get past this. I suppose we don't have a deadline for, I know what it was, a deadline for the strategic plan, but let me come back. So if we're going to be facilitated, and I only hear wonderful things about the Council of Great City Schools, and I think most of our senior leadership has participated in that. I certainly plan to. I had it on my planner if we ever get past the pandemic so that I can do that. I think you guys did a lot of collegial bonding when you were at the last conference. But it's my understanding, and I want to be part of that. So here's what I want to know, though. Go to the data. If a facilitator from Great City Schools were to work with us, I don't want to work just with someone who has a great plan. I want to work with someone who has data to show that their plan works. And that's very important to me. I don't want somebody to tell me how to build a plan. That was it. Thank you.
So board members, I'm not sure what we're asking the superintendent to do now. So we're going to go forward on March 3rd with the structural part of it. Go ahead.
So what I'm asking is, with a nod of heads, if this board would like the superintendent to come back to us and let us know what the cost would be to have the Council of Great City Schools come in to facilitate. Mrs. McQuinn, I can assure you that that's exactly what we were looking at, not just somebody to hand us a plan. Because I think that we already are, we talk about being the top urban school district in Florida. I want to be the top urban district in the United States. I want us to set a high bar. And so I think that that's what we want, is for the superintendent to come back and let us know what it would be and let us vote on it.
Dr. Robinson?
Yes, I would agree with that, and also what I would like to see in whatever from the Council of Great City Schools in terms of a proposal is what work they do with the board. Because again, I'm really stuck on the fact that we need to look at the data to know what's broken. I mean, there's some things that are working, right? Like, so why would we mess with that, right? So, but we need to look at and truly with an eye on equity on what things are not working. And hopefully that's automatically part of the Council of Great City Schools process, but I want to make sure it is.
Board members, superintendent's got a plan for March 3rd. So the question is, what exactly do you want the superintendent to do on March 3rd besides bring us a price on what it would cost to get a facilitator in here from Great City Schools? I mean, he's got all this laid out, and, we got to give direction, right? We can't just leave it up in the air about, we all want to have equity workshops and forget about the plan for now. So, Ms. McQuinn?
I don't want to make, other than what we've asked the superintendent for in terms of cost, because we know how much Master Board was going to cost. And again, I want data. I don't want to hear anybody's plan if they can't show that they got results. That's what this district, I believe, still does, is to look at schools who have been successful in any little data box and, okay, what are you doing? And can that be applied to other schools? I don't want just we think something will work. So I'm not comfortable yet that we're on the same page with that. Otherwise, I don't want to make a decision tonight. All of this is thrown at us in a discussion. I don't want to do that. I want to do March 3rd. I want to see the structure. Then we can have a discussion then about where we want to go next. I don't want to throw anything else in the mix right now.
All right, so instead of having another hour of discussion, are we all in agreement that on March 3rd, he'll bring
Yes.
back what he's planning on bringing for us? And in the meantime, we'll contact Great City Schools and find out what it would cost to bring a facilitator in here that is not going to build a plan for us, but is going to, do what Mrs. McQuinn said. Yeah.
So
Okay,
yes,
let's
and
just
that's
not
what I
keep
was
going
going
on and on and on with discussion
Okay,
on this.
well, let me finish with this, because I think this is really important. I'll go on and on and on all night when it comes to the strategic plan. This is Marsha's fault, because she got me involved with this. So, but anyway, I completely agree. We're going to go forward on the 3rd. do what was planned, but I expect the superintendent to have staff have those conversations and come back and put an item out there for us so that we, from what I understand, we're not going to be looking at the strategic plan in the month of March anyway, or in April. So we have the time to hire a consultant. Even if we just do the third, and you can't get the information, then come back the next week with it. But bring back information to us. And Dr. Robinson, I wasn't going to mention this here, but just so you know, my conversation with Dr. Fenoy this week, I talked about the data, and I talked about feeling what you were talking about. And I was told that Dr. Fenoy is planning to bring that back to us also, because I had tied it in with that academic improvement, whatever the plan is. And I said, we need to hear the figures, we need to hear the data first. But the whole weekend, after being with them, I understood where you were coming from.
So let me just say, I'll have Mr. Tierney respond to this, but there's a couple of things I want to do. So the data workshop is on March 3rd, so we're bringing all of that back on the 3rd. The other thing about the consultant, so remember, consultant contracts have beginning dates and end dates. So I'll let Mr. Tierney speak, but at some point, if we hire a contract, the question becomes, really here's the question that I have. Do we even want to do a strategic plan for next year? Because if the answer is no, then that can change everything, because what we can't do is roll out a strategic plan in November. That doesn't make any sense because you need summers to get ready for the changes, right? So I'll let Ed speak, but and I also need Ed, make sure that Kathy sends the board again the timelines that we've already created with all of the pieces that are spelled out about what was happening on those days, so that you'll know exactly. We've already mapped it out. And again, it's still March 3rd. That's the data workshop. But I don't know if any of you remembered that is what next week is. It's the data workshop. So I want to make sure that you are refed all the information that we've created. We will definitely bring back the information about the council. But there's another thing Ms. Brill said that is interesting to me. How do you not know that Palm Beach is one of the top urban districts in the country? Because I keep hearing you say, find a district who's done, and I want to know who these people are. Like who has done, remember the strategic plan is unique to us. It is not a replication of someone else's work. It's just not. So I think so Dr. Robinson is absolutely correct. We have to own this work. And so I think that's the tension point I'm having is, are we going to commit the time to get it done, or are we just going to push this thing back into, because at some point, again, I have to apologize for who I am as a person. We have to have a date that things are due in order to plan towards that date. And so Mr. Tierney, I'll let you go, but we have to figure this timeline out.
So I'll address as many of the comments as I could kind of take notes on as they came. First, the flow of creating the strategic plan before or concordant with defining equity, mission, vision. That's not how it's laid out. We're going to do mission, vision, and equity in the month of March. Those are the workshops that are scheduled or being scheduled, with a draft of the strategic plan not due until May. So the whole sequencing plan was always to build mission, vision, then equity, then with a strategic plan framework. We did make an adjustment per Dr. Robinson's comment that if equity is going to be in the mission and vision, how do we not define that first? So we did flip that, because that did make sense, that if we're going to use that word in there. So we made that slight adjustment, but it was always those three items addressed prior to strategic plan. So the workshop on the strategic plan in March is really just a structural. This is how it will be laid out. This is the dates. This is how we will go about interfacing with the community. So it wasn't going to be one before the other. The data, the board pushed, Ms. Andrews particularly, but the board really wanted to hear basically a sunsetting of the current strategic plan. How did we do? We want to hear that before we move to the next one. And that is one of the three workshops on March 3rd, to give a very detailed brief to the board that's data rich on the current strategic plan, which will probably highlight some of the directions we want to go for the next strategic plan. Now, Mary Furtakis, our consultant, she will not participate in that data portion, but she'll be listening. We're going to give her a link. We spoke with her today because she thought hearing the data in the current strategic plan would then help her as she walks you through the needs assessment process to help create the next strategic plan. So her conversations with the board that she'll send up individually, and then at a future meeting will be, what do you think the needs assessment are? What should the district start doing, stop doing, keep doing, after you've got the benefit of hearing all the data from the March 3rd workshop. And then for Insight, who we're working with now, who I've personally found to be impressive as far as I don't have their resume to go through their whole litany, but they did work with Dina Hayes, who's connected with REI, so we did kind of look in to make sure they had an equity background and an ability to walk that walk, and we found that they did, and they've been impressive to date. And I think I'll stop there for if there would look like there's a question.
And I would just add on the insights, another thing we found out, so the superintendent in Greensboro is on a council graded schools with me, and so Insights is who did the work with the board in Greensboro to get them ready for the strategic planning initiative, and that was part of our research when Dr. LaCava's team brought that to us.
Ms. McQuinn?
I've been relatively quiet. I just want us as a body to remember that when we start our superintendent's evaluation, it's hard for him to bring a staff together and say, clearly our board thinks we're not paying attention to equity, in particular racial equity, because we know they are. I feel like we're saying to them, well, you guys need to just start over because you're not taking this into consideration. So we're sending our superintendent back to a staff who has heard our direction. And then we're going to hold him accountable because we have yet another thought.
Mrs. Whitfield and Dr. Robinson and Vice Chairwoman Brill.
So I keep thinking about what Dr. Fenoy always says to me when I call with a question. He says, what problem are you trying to solve? And I love that because it really makes me question back to myself again, what problem am I trying to solve? So I feel like if the problem that you're trying to solve is that we make sure that equity is at the front end of this, and then the strategic planning is the back end, it sounds like the schedule kind of aligns to that already. So why don't we just ask staff to make sure that that's the case? Is that not what you're going for? I see you shaking. No.
Dr. Robinson, Vice Chairwoman Brill, then Mrs. Andrews.
Dr. Robinson said I should go first. So all I was going to say was listening to Mr. Tierney's schedule, it doesn't have to be completely uprooted if you bring in somebody who is going to help facilitate it. For example, you are going to have those listening sessions. So the whole thing doesn't have to be uprooted because you're going to have somebody come in and help us with identifying what we need to do. And I do think that it's good to have fresh ideas. This isn't saying that we discount staff at all. And we do understand that we are looking at equity. All it's saying is bringing someone in who can help us get to the next level.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So, God, I gotta have a lot to say. I'm gonna try to limit it. So, the problem that I'm trying, okay, let me back it up and say this. So I've been looking at disaggregated data for decades, right? And I think that I publicly apologized from this dais to whoever was on the board at that point in time when I realized that everybody wasn't looking at data, right? So now Ms. Brill just said, because she's in the Council of Great City Schools board chair cohort, then now she understands what I'm talking about. The problem I'm trying to solve is I don't know if anybody understands what the hell I'm talking about. I keep looking at this data. Yeah, we can say we're talking about racial equity. We are not walking the walk. I know that we have great staff and they want to address each child. I get it. But guess what? We're the board and we're going to have to do things to support them in doing that. And so the problem I'm trying to solve is our lack of understanding, whatever it might be. I'm not saying I know everything. I can't wait for these folks to come and teach me something. But that's the problem I'm trying to solve because I don't understand how we create a strategic plan that we own if what we get is a one session like the shiny book of the superintendent's evaluation that's just got all this data in there. And guess what I know? I know how to tell the story I want to tell with data at times, right? And so all I'm saying is I spend time, and Mark Howard is probably sorry that he spends time with me and we sit there and play with his Excel spreadsheets. You should see the spreadsheet on acceleration. I mean, I'm just telling you, that's the problem I'm trying to solve because I don't even know how we really get to a real substantive strategic plan if we don't understand what the problems are. And to Ms. McQuinn's point, I agree with you. We want somebody who has solved the problem. But it's no school district that's walking on water. But guess what? This school district over here might have solved the problem with AP potential. So let's talk to them about that problem that we're going to address in the strategic plan. And this one over here has solved it. Let's talk to that one about this problem, right? So we can craft together, we can cobble together from our list of issues that we have identified from studying the data, and then we can go to people and get their expertise for the things that they have solved. And that's how we cobble together, in my opinion, a strategic plan. I'm all great with facilitators, Council of Great City Schools, and you know, all that's fine. All that's fine. But in answer to the question previously asked, you know what? I'm good if we decide that this strategic plan will be moved into action for August of 22. I'm fine with that, right? Because I want it done right. I want it to be rich. I want it to be real. I want it to help students and help the adults that we pay to serve them, right, in getting that work done. So, and I'm telling you, the problem I'm trying to solve is us, okay?
I'm not going to be quiet, Mr. Barbieri. I am not going to be quiet just
I'm not
because
asking
we're
to
ready
be
to go
quiet.
home.
Mrs. Andrews was next, so
Okay.
I'll get to you right after Mrs. Andrews.
Yes, and as I listen to this conversation, we've had the shiny books. And I do appreciate what everybody does here, but we've got to take a real inside look at the needs within our district. And this is why we pay the money to be a member, Dr. Fenoy. I know it costs the additional money to bring the consultant in, but this is why we have those conversations. Mr. Burke knows he has those conversations on the finance piece with all the folks that have like kinds of issues. We have to look at ourselves. We're not anybody else. We are Palm Beach County. We know what our needs are and where we need to go. I don't want us rushing with this strategic plan. I don't want another shiny book that has all this great stuff and we really don't know where we're going. We've got to kind of be able to get a roadmap of what the issues are, the things that did not work, looking at the data, looking at our curriculums, looking at all the pieces of the puzzle as to what we need to put in play. We may not be ready to say that we're going to have a strategic plan by this date. I would like to spend the time digesting information, looking at our district, and trying to figure out where we go from here to build a strategic plan. It's going to take money. It's going to be a budgeted piece for us to put in place to do the things that we really need to do. And once you talk about, Mr. Tierney, the things that we didn't do the last time, you all know those pieces, and I know some of those pieces. So once we begin to look at all of the pieces, we've got to disaggregate all of that and figure out where we go from here. That's why a consultant who's working with a lot of people who've had these same kind of structural issues and moving their district, they know the ins and outs of the things that caused problems before and how they were able to overcome them. We will look at ourselves and see that we had a problem here, and how do you overcome this to get to the next level? It will take time, and it can't be done just overnight. And I'm waiting to hear from people who can kind of tell me to look at it this way, this is something you need to work on. And so I think we do need it. That's why you're getting that, Ms. Brill, with those sessions. And that's a big deal that you're getting. So as a result, I want to be able for us to get that piece. And you have to look at people who are similar to how you are. They're not the same as what we are in Palm Beach County, but they're the big urban, so they're experiencing the same thing. And some of them have started this equity piece a long before us. That's what I keep telling you. They're a long way, and they've had the stumbling blocks that we're going to be going through as we work through our process. And that's where the consultant can come in and tell you, well, we've already been here before, and you may need to tweak this or tweak that. Or we may have our staff that knows exactly which way to go with this. But sometimes when you have someone that's already done it with many different groups, it can help you flow. So I think that flowing piece is important. And I really do want to go through that book, because I can tell you, when I read it over and over again, I just know that there's a lot of work to be done if we really truly are going to build a real strategic plan that's going to be meaningful, to say that we really are going to make the difference for the children's success.
Ms. McQuinn and then Mrs. Whitfield.
I'm going to keep coming back to the superintendent's leadership. I don't disagree with anybody what you're saying. I don't want a plan just for a plan. But I think that I know that he is involved with the Council of Great City Schools. I know that he has contacts. I know he's been working with them. So I just want us to remember that piece. The other piece is we can take our time. Schools will start their plans. They have a state deadline that they have to submit strategic plans for next year. Doesn't matter. They don't need our direction because they've got to do it with or without our direction.
Mrs. Whitfield?
I just want to say I'm not comfortable making a decision on this tonight at all because I'm completely, I don't have enough background on what changing the schedule will do to the schedule, what it'll do to the schools, what it's going to do to our progress as a district. We have kids that are failing. I keep thinking like we haven't thought this through. So if we could tonight just decide to at least come to the March 3rd meeting and we could have a better discussion where I can actually have some data and information on what this whole change would look like and mean. And I'd love to know the cost of the Insight group as well, or whatever the group is that you want to bring in from Council of Great City Schools.
Thank you, Mrs. Whitfield. Dr. Robinson?
Insights is free to us. It's a grant. People have given us grant money for that one.
Sorry, the Council of Great City Schools people, how much they're going to cost.
Listen, guys, you may get angry with me, but we got to wrap this up. I mean, we can't just, everybody wants to keep going over the same thing. So we've agreed that we're going to let him do it on March 3rd, what he's going to do, and we're going to look at the schedule that Mr. Tierney has, and we're done with this tonight. I mean, what's the point of saying it over and over and over again in different ways, right? Dr. Robinson, okay?
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to say, Mr. Barbieri.
Well, you don't even have to say it now because I said
That's why I started laughing. But the other thing is staff has heard the conversation. And so they can take from that, and then March 3rd, they can give us pros, cons, whatever.
All right.
The conversation is good.
All right, so we're done with this discussion item. We need a motion to adjourn. Everybody made the motion and everybody's in favor. Meeting is adjourned.